The chain yanked her forward. Elowen stumbled onto the stage, barefoot, blinded by torchlight. "Lot 23!" The auctioneer's voice boomed across the underground hall. "Omega, no wolf, no scent, no pack. Starting bid, 500 silver." Silence. Hundreds of alphas sat in tiered rows. Not one raised a hand, not one even looked up. The auctioneer's grin twitched. 300. Nothing. 200. Someone coughed. 100 silver. "Come on, gentlemen. She's young. She's breathing. Surely that's worth something." A voice from the third row. "I wouldn't take her to clean my kennels." Laughter. Sharp. Cruel. Spreading like fire through dry grass. 50 silver. The auctioneer's smile was gone now. 50, anyone. The hall was quiet, the kind of quiet that has teeth. Elowen stood at the center of the stage, in iron shackles chewing into her wrists, her shift dress thin enough to feel every stare, every dismissal, every pair of eyes that slid over her like she was furniture. Her heart slammed against her ribs, her vision blurred. She counted the cracks in the wooden floor because if she looked up, if she saw their faces, she would shatter. The auctioneer turned to the crowd and spread his arms wide. His gold rings caught the torchlight as he laughed. A big, theatrical, ugly laugh. "Free to whoever wants the trash! Take her or I feed her to the pit wolves!" The hall exploded, howling, clapping, stomping boots. Laughter so loud it vibrated through the stage and up through her bare feet and into her chest, where a wolf should have lived but never did. Elowen closed her eyes and nodded. "Yes, I am nothing." Then a voice spoke from the dark. Is 2 words, quiet, final, like a door slamming shut on the throat of the world. "Unchain her." Every torch flickered, every laugh died, and the silence that followed was the most terrifying sound Elowen had ever heard. She was 6 when the fires came. Elowen remembered it in fragments, the way memories break when a child's mind can't hold the whole truth. Smoke that turned the sky black at noon. Screaming that didn't sound human. Her mother's hands shaking, pressing something cold and metal into her palm. A pendant, silver, warm from her mother's skin. "Don't let go," her mother whispered. "Don't ever let go." Then her mother's hands were gone, and the world was heat and noise, and the smell of burning fur, and then nothing at all. The Ashgrove pack was old, small but ancient, respected in the quiet way that deep-rooted things are respected, not for power, but for lineage. They had lived in the northern woods for generations, kept to themselves, bothered no one. It didn't save them. The territorial raid came at dawn, and by dusk the pack was ash. And Elowen was found in the wreckage 3 days later by a search party, dehydrated, silent, clutching the pendant so tightly it had cut into her palm. The only survivor of a bloodline no one thought to protect until it was too late. Draven Valmir took her in. Alpha of the Iron Maw pack, powerful, respected, politically shrewd. He told the councils he was being charitable. "A war orphan," he said. "The least we can do." They praised him for it. Generous Alpha. Noble heart. They didn't see the way his eyes lingered on the pendant around her neck. They didn't notice that he never once called her daughter. She was given a storage room beneath the stairs, a thin blanket, a list of duties longer than her arm. She scrubbed floors before dawn, carried water from the well until her shoulders burned, washed linens, peeled roots, swept hearths. She ate after the family finished, if there was anything left. Often there wasn't. Draven's real children, Cademan broad and cruel at 14, and Vesta, sharp-tongued and already beautiful at 12, treated her like furniture that occasionally made the mistake of breathing too loudly. Cademan tripped her on the stairs for sport. Vesta once poured a bucket of dirty mop water over Elowen's head in front of the entire kitchen staff and laughed until she cried. No one intervened. No one ever did. But the worst part wasn't the work, wasn't the hunger, wasn't even the loneliness. It was the silence inside her. Every wolf-born child in the Ironmaw pack shifted by 13. It was celebrated, a howling, joyful, communal thing. Elowen watched from the kitchen window as her age mates transformed, their wolves bursting forth in flashes of fur and wild golden eyes. She waited for hers. 13 passed. 14. 15. Nothing. No stirring. No warmth. No presence in her chest where every other wolf described a second heartbeat, a companion, a voice. She was tested, examined, poked and prodded by the pack healer, who frowned, shrugged, and said the words that became her epitaph. Some are simply born empty. Empty. The words settled into her bones and stayed. She was 19 when Draven called her to his study. He didn't offer her a seat. He told her, voice flat as a ledger entry, that she had become a burden the pack could no longer justify. He'd registered her for the harvest auction. She would be sold in 3 days. She stood very still. Is there anything I can do to stay? He looked through her. Not at her. Through her, yet as if she were glass, as if she were already gone. You've never been anything, Elowen. At least this way, you'll be useful. She didn't cry. She'd run out of tears years ago. That night she packed her mother's pendant, the only thing she owned in this world, and was loaded into an iron cart with 11 other unclaimed wolves. The door clanged shut. The cart lurched forward. No one watched it leave. Now she sat in a holding cell beneath the auction hall, knees drawn to her chest, listening to the muffled thunder above. Gavels cracking, crowds roaring, lot numbers called like death sentences. The sound moved closer. Her number approached. She pressed the pendant to her lips. The silver was warm, the way it always was, as if something inside it still carried heat. "I'm sorry I wasn't more," she whispered. The cell door opened, and a guard jerked his chin. "Lot 23, you're up." Elowen stood. Her legs shook but held. She tucked the pendant beneath her shift, close to her heart, and walked toward the light. The hall smelled like smoke, ale, and something underneath both that Elowen couldn't name. Something animal. Something that made the skin on her arms prickle the moment the guards pushed her through the iron door and into the light. It was underground, carved from raw stone, massive, older than anything she'd ever seen. Iron chandeliers hung from the ceiling on thick chains, dripping wax onto the crowd below like slow, pale rain. Torches lined the walls in rusted brackets, their flames painting everything in shades of orange and black. Tiered wooden benches rose steeply on 3 sides, packed with bodies, alphas in fine coats and heavy rings, alphas in leather and scars, women draped in fur who watched the stage with the same flat appraisal they'd give cattle at market. Hundreds of them. The noise was a living thing. Laughter, shouting, the crack of a gavel, the clink of coins changing hands. And at the center of it all, the stage. Rough wooden planks stained dark by years of use. Iron posts bolted to the floor with chains hanging from their rings. A place built for livestock, used for people. The auctioneer stood at the front of the stage like he owned the world and found it mildly amusing. Harsk Gren, a heavy man stuffed into a velvet coat that might have been expensive once, before the wine stains and the stretched seams. Gold rings crowded his thick fingers. His voice was enormous, a showman's instrument, booming and jovial and utterly without mercy. Meant he'd been working the crowd for hours and he was enjoying himself immensely, rolling through lots like a performer feeding off applause, cracking jokes about the wolves displayed before him as if they couldn't hear, as if they weren't standing right there. The guards stripped Elowen's transport shackles and replaced them with auction irons. Lighter, thinner, designed to display rather than restrain. They clamped cold around her wrists. She was pushed forward. The torchlight hit her full in the face and she squinted, her eyes watering, her bare feet finding the edge of the stage. The wood was rough and cold. She could feel the grain of it, the splinters waiting. Hundreds of eyes landed on her at once. Harsk glanced at the lot card in his hand. He didn't bother with enthusiasm. Lot 23, Omega. No detectable wolf, no viable scent. In no pack affiliation. Orphan of the Ashgrove line. Extinct. He said it the way someone reads a list of defects on damaged goods. Starting bid, 500 silver. Silence. He waited, eyebrows raised. The hall was still. 300. Someone coughed. No hands rose. 200 silver. She's young, gentlemen, functional. Surely someone has a use. An alpha in the front row glanced at her, assessed her the way you check a bruised apple, and looked away. 100. A murmur of amusement now. The crowd was watching, not with interest but with the slow, ugly pleasure of an audience that senses a public failure unfolding. Entertainment. 50 silver. Come now. 50. A voice from the third row, loud and lazy. I wouldn't take her to clean my kennels. Laughter. Another voice. Further back. What am I supposed to do with a wolfless runt? More laughter. A woman in white fur leaned to her companion, her whisper designed to carry, I've seen better stock in a butcher's yard. Each word landed on Elowen like a stone dropped from a height. She didn't flinch. She didn't react. Her face was still, her hands steady at her sides, the iron cuffs hanging from her thin wrists like ornaments for a body nobody wanted to decorate. But inside, the thing that had been barely holding together for 19 years was coming apart. Not with a crack, not with a sound. Just a slow, quiet surrender, like soil sliding into a river. Each rejection wasn't a surprise. Each one was a confirmation of something she had always suspected and could no longer deny. Harsk's showman patience ran dry. His grin shifted, still wide, but the warmth drained out of it, leaving something mean and bright. He looked at Elowen. He looked at the crowd. He spread his arms wide, gold rings catching the torchlight. Well then, free to whoever wants the trash. His voice rang off the stone. Take her, or I feed her to the pit wolves. Come on, surely someone needs a floor scrubber. The hall exploded, howling, clapping, stomping boots, laughter so loud it vibrated through the wooden stage and up through her bare feet and into her chest, where a wolf should have lived but never did. Elowen closed her eyes and nodded. A tiny movement, almost invisible. Not for the crowd, not for Harsk, for herself. A final quiet agreement with the verdict the world had been handing her since she was 6 years old. Yes, you're right. I am nothing. I always was. Then the air changed. As she felt it before she understood it, a pressure drop, sudden and immense, as if the ceiling had been ripped away and the sky had rushed in. The torches guttered, every flame in the hall bending sideways, as though something vast had exhaled. The laughter continued for 2 more seconds, running on its own momentum, before it noticed it was laughing alone. Because a voice had spoken from the back of the hall, not loud, not shouting. 2 words delivered in a tone so low and so absolute that they didn't compete with the noise. They replaced it. Unchain her. The silence that followed was not a fade. It was an execution. Every laugh, every murmur, every breath, killed instantly, completely, as if sound itself had been commanded to kneel. Harsk's grin was still on his face, frozen mid-performance, his gavel suspended in the air. His eyes darted toward the back of the hall and the color left his skin in stages, like paint peeling from a wall. Heavy boots struck stone. A figure moved from the shadows at the far end of the hall. The crowd didn't part willingly. They parted the way prey animals clear a path, bodies pressing back against benches, heads dropping, eyes averted. Instinct, not respect. Survival. Elowen opened her eyes. The laughter was gone. Every head in the hall had turned toward the back of the room, toward something she couldn't yet see. She blinked against the torchlight, confused, her pulse thudding in her ears. The flames were behaving strangely, burning brighter on one side of the hall and dimmer on the other, as if the light itself couldn't decide whether to illuminate what was coming or flee from it. And then the crowd shifted and she saw him. A man walking forward out of the dark, tall, broad, dressed in black and gold, moving with the unhurried certainty of something that has never once been afraid. She didn't know who he was, but her chest, that hollow, silent, empty place where a wolf should have lived for 19 years and never did, trembled. He had been sitting in the back row for 2 hours, hooded, still, hands loose on his knees, the gold of his gauntlets hidden beneath the dark fall of his coat. Watching. Every lot. Every bid. Every greasy smile the auctioneer wore when the price climbed. Every bored shrug when it didn't. Lirien Cade had come to the harvest auction the way a blade comes to a wound. Not to participate, but to open it up and see what festered underneath. His intelligence network had been feeding him reports for months. Forced bondings, underage sales, exploitation so routine it had developed its own paperwork. He came to observe, to catalog, to gather what he needed before he burned the entire institution to its foundation. Then they brought her out. His wolf, silent, leashed, iron-disciplined for 20 years, detonated. There was no other word for it. The thing behind his ribs that he had spent his entire adult life controlling surged forward with a violence that nearly buckled his knees, nearly cracked his teeth, nearly sent him out of his seat and through the crowd like a battering ram, despite the seal on her scent, despite every magical suppression designed to make her invisible, forgettable, nothing. The bond punched through all of it like a fist through glass and seized him by the spine. Mine. He didn't understand it, he didn't question it, and he waited, through the bidding, through the silence that followed, through the dropping price, 50, 30, 10, nothing. He watched every alpha in the room look at her and see less than nothing. He cataloged their faces, he memorized their voices. When the laughter started, he let it come. Because he needed to know exactly how many of them laughed at his mate and called it sport. Then Harsk leaned into his platform and put his greasy mouth around the word trash, and the last thread of Lirien's restraint turned to ash. He stood. The hood fell. The walk to the stage was not fast. Every step landed like a drumbeat, deliberate, measured, the steady rhythm of something that could not be stopped and knew it. The crowd shrank. Alphas who had been laughing pressed their spines against their seats and tucked their chins and couldn't have said why. Some recognized the gold circlet on his dark hair. Those who didn't still felt it, the tidal, crushing weight of a wolf so dominant that the air bent around him like heat off stone. Harsk's face drained in stages. Confusion, recognition, terror. His gavel hand shook. Your Majesty, we weren't expecting. Lirien didn't look at him. He climbed the stage. The wood groaned beneath his weight. He crossed to where she stood, barefoot, trembling, her amber eyes wide and wet, and staring up at him as though he were something she'd imagined in the worst moment of her life and couldn't trust to be real. He was so much larger than her. His shadow swallowed hers entirely. Look at me. His voice had dropped. No longer a king's voice, but something rawer, rougher, stripped down to whatever lived beneath the title. She tried. Her gaze climbed to his chest and stopped. I can't, she whispered. I'm not allowed to look at... You're allowed. Look at me. She lifted her eyes. Silver met amber. The world shifted on its axis and did not shift back. He reached down, wrapped both hands around the iron shackles on her wrists, and pulled them apart. The metal screamed, twisted, fell to the stage in 2 ruined halves, and the sound rang through the silent hall like a declaration of war. Then his fingers brushed the raw, chafed skin beneath, and both of them gasped. Heat erupted between them. Light bloomed under her skin, golden, pulsing, alive. Something ancient and sealed and patient for 19 years cracked open like ice in spring. Elowen stumbled. Lirien caught her, and on her inner left wrist, rising to the surface like a sun breaking through frozen water, a luminous golden sigil burned itself into being. Delicate, intricate, unmistakable. The crowd saw it. Someone screamed. Someone. The sigil burned, not like fire, like sunrise. Gold-white light pulsed beneath the skin of her inner wrist in rhythm with her heartbeat, spreading outward in delicate branching lines, a crescent wrapped in roots, luminous and ancient, something drawn in an age before ink existed. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. And every wolf in the Undercroft felt it hit them at the same moment, not through their eyes but through their blood, their marrow, a resonance so deep it bypassed thought entirely and struck something older, something species deep, as if a door sealed for 3 centuries had just been kicked open. Elowen couldn't breathe. Her wrist was burning. Her chest, that hollow, dead silent place she had carried since childhood like an empty room, was no longer empty. Something was moving in there, stretching, uncurling, breathing for the first time in 2 decades of forced sleep, pressing against the inside of her ribs with a pressure that made her vision white out at the edges. "What did you do to me?" She choked the words out, her free hand clawing at her own sternum. "What is this? What is—" Lirien's hands were on her arms, steady, iron. His face had changed, not softened, never that, but something behind the severity had shifted. He had expected the bond. He had not expected this. The sigil on her wrist was something he had seen exactly once, in the oldest text in his kingdom's archive, a manuscript so fragile it was kept in a sealed room and read by candlelight. The Moonkeeper sigil, a bloodline designation that hadn't surfaced in over 300 years, a lineage the entire world believed was extinct, that she was shaking so violently he could feel her bones rattling beneath his grip. "Breathe," he said. A command. Not cruel, but absolute. "Stay with me. Breathe. It hurts." "I know. It will pass. Look at me. Only at me." She tried. Her amber eyes found his silver ones and held on like a drowning thing gripping rope. The light on her wrist pulsed, surged, and slowly, not easily, not gently, began to settle into a steady, rhythmic glow. The hall erupted. Alphas were on their feet. Some pressed forward, craning to see the mark. Others backed toward the exits with the jerky, instinctive retreat of animals who had just heard a predator's call. Harsk was plastered against the back wall of the stage, his gavel on the floor, his red face gone the color of old bone. He had called a moonkeeper trash. He had put his mouth around that word and aimed it at a bloodline that predated his entire civilization. The understanding of what that meant was settling over him like a burial shroud. Lirien turned his head toward the hall, one arm still around Elowen, a wall between her and the chaos. His voice returned to its full, crushing weight. "This auction is over. Every wolf in chains is to be released immediately. Anyone who resists will answer to me personally." The silence that followed lasted 2 seconds. Then a voice cut through it. Calm, cold, precise as a surgical blade. "That won't be necessary, Your Majesty. She's my property." Draven Valmir stepped from the crowd like a man stepping into a boardroom, composed, well-dressed, every inch the respectable alpha, groomed, measured, perfectly still. Had his eyes found Elowen on the stage, and the expression in them was not anger, it was hunger, patient, familiar hunger, the kind that had learned to wear a civilized face. Elowen went rigid. She knew him, the man who had raised her, the man who had sold her. And for the first time on the auction stage, her face changed. Not grief, not the careful blankness she had worn like armor all night. Fear. Specific, learned, bone-deep fear. The kind that only comes from someone who has already proven what they are willing to do. Lyrien's arm tightened around her. He faced Draven across the stage. When he spoke, his voice was so soft it barely carried, and every wolf in the room heard it anyway. Your property? A pause, quiet as the space between a lightning flash and thunder. Tell me, Alpha Valmir. Tell me exactly how you came to own my mate. The word mate detonated through the hall like a bomb. Draven smiled. That was the worst part. He smiled the way he had always smiled. Patient, measured, the long-suffering expression of a man burdened by his own generosity. He explained himself to the hall the way he might explain a difficult financial decision. The Ashgrove pack was destroyed. The child had nowhere to go. He took her in out of charity, fed her, housed her, gave her 19 years of his protection, despite her having no wolf, no value, no prospects. Selling her at auction was a mercy, a chance to find purpose with an alpha who might have use for a girl no one else wanted. He framed himself as a saint. He nearly made it sound true. You knew what she was. Lyrien's voice cut through the performance like a blade through paper. Not a question, a verdict. You recognized the Ashgrove name. You knew the bloodline. And that's why you took her in, not charity. Containment. Draven's composure flickered. The Moonkeeper line died with her parents. Then why is the ash mark burning on her wrist right now? The silence that followed was surgical. And under the full crushing weight of an Alpha King's dominance pressing down on him like a hand on his throat, Draven Valmir broke, not all at once, in stages. Like a dam fracturing from the center outward, he knew, he had always known. The Ashgrove pack was destroyed because of the bloodline, rival packs trying to seize Moonkeeper power. He took Elowen to control what remained. A Moonkeeper's blood could be harvested, distilled, weaponized, used to amplify pack bonds, enhance alpha dominance, break enemy wolves from the inside. He kept her starved and small and sleeping in a closet beneath his dining room because weak girls don't ask questions. When private tests revealed her wolf wasn't absent but sealed, he realized he couldn't crack it himself. So he arranged a buyer, a rogue alpha named King Lirien, someone with the knowledge and the cruelty to break her open and drain what was inside. The public auction was theater. He put her on stage knowing no one would bid. The humiliation was engineered, so that when she disappeared afterward, no one would care enough to ask where the trash went. Elowen listened to every word. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She stood on that stage with the ash mark pulsing on her wrist and 19 years of confusion collapsing into the most devastating clarity a person can experience. I wasn't broken. Oh, I was buried alive. And when Draven finished, she said in a voice so small it barely carried past Lyrien's chest, I used to pray you'd call me daughter, just once. Draven's jaw tightened. He said nothing. The stone floor beneath Lyrien's boots fractured. His eyes burned silver white. You raised her in chains, starved her, and sold her, knowing she was a moonkeeper, knowing she was my mate. The pause lasted a heartbeat. You will answer for every single day. Draven's lip curled. One last play, aimed not at Lirien, but at the girl behind him. She's nothing without the blood. You think she can rule? She can barely stand. She spent her whole life on her knees. That's all she knows. Elowen flinched. Because the broken, buried part of her, the part that had slept in a closet and said thank you for table scraps, believed him. Lirien didn't argue with Draven. He turned, crouched slightly, the Alpha King lowering himself until his silver eyes were level with her amber ones. Do you believe him? She swallowed. I don't know what to believe anymore. Then believe this. His voice was quiet. Only hers. I didn't come here looking for a moonkeeper. I didn't come here looking for a bloodline. My wolf recognized you before the mark appeared, before I knew your name, before any of this. He paused. I'm not claiming a bloodline, I'm claiming you. The hall was empty now. Guards had cleared the crowd, released the other captives from their chains, and taken Draven somewhere Elowen couldn't see. The torches burned low. The massive underground chamber, stripped of its audience, its noise, its cruelty, was just a room, stone and wood and smoke and silence, a cathedral of nothing. Elowen sat on the edge of the auction stage. The same wood where she'd stood in shackles minutes ago. Her bare feet hung over the edge, not touching the floor, and in the vast emptiness of the hall she looked impossibly small, a smudge of ash-white and dark hair and bruised skin perched on the lip of her own worst memory. The ash mark pulsed faintly on her wrist. She didn't look at it. Lirien's coat was draped over her shoulders. She was swimming in it, the fur collar swallowing her to the ears, at the hem pooling around her like a tide. He had removed his crown. He stood nearby, close enough to reach, far enough to not be another wall. I keep waiting to wake up, she said. This doesn't feel real. It's real. Then it's a mistake. Her voice was flat, careful, the voice of someone reassembling logic from wreckage. Mate bonds can be wrong. This one must be. Why? Because you're a king, and an hour ago I was worth less than the wood I'm sitting on. That's not a pairing. That's a punchline. The silence that followed had weight. When he spoke, his voice was quiet and fierce in equal measure. Your worth was never determined by what those men were willing to pay. Then what determines it? He looked at her for a long time. You do. She didn't answer. He let the silence hold. Then he laid it before her, not a command, and not a claim, an offering placed on the ground between them like something fragile. I can take you to the northern court. You would be protected. The bond would be honored. You would never stand on a stage like this again. He paused. Or I can give you a horse, provisions, gold, a new name, and safe passage to wherever you want to go. No one will follow you. No one will find you. You can disappear and build whatever life you choose. She stared at him. You would let me go? After all this? I would hate it. The rawness in his voice was startling, a crack in the bedrock. Every instinct I have is telling me to hold on and never let go. But you've spent your entire life being owned. I won't be the next man who decides your future without asking. The silence stretched. Elowen looked at the stage beneath her, at the broken shackles on the floor, at the spot where she'd stood when the word trash was still echoing off the walls. She thought about 19 years, the closet, the silence in her chest, the tiny devastating nod she'd given, over and over, year after year, when the world told her she was nothing, and she agreed. She slid off the stage. Her bare feet hit cold stone. She was shaking, but she was standing. I've spent my whole life being given away, she said. Her voice trembled but did not break. By fate, by Draven, by every alpha in this room who looked at me and saw trash. She met his eyes. If I leave, I'll survive. I'm good at surviving. But I'll spend the rest of my life running from the girl who stood on that stage and believed she deserved to be there. Her hands clenched at her sides. I'm tired of running from her. A breath. Then, quiet, certain, unshakable. I'm staying. Not because you want me to. Not because of the mark or the bond or the bloodline. She lifted her chin, and despite the dirt and the bruises and the bare feet and the borrowed coat, she looked like someone who had just decided to exist on purpose. Because I am done being for sale. Lirien didn't speak. He dropped to one knee on the cold stone floor, the Alpha King kneeling before the girl they tried to give away for free. His head bowed. Then I kneel not as your king, he said quietly, but as the first man who will never ask you to be less than you are. The ash mark flared white gold on her wrist, and somewhere far above, through the fracture in the stone ceiling that no one had noticed until this moment. Moonlight broke through, so brighter than any torch, and poured over them both like silver water, like benediction, like the world finally, belatedly, answering a prayer no one had thought to speak. Morning came like a verdict. Lirien's soldiers moved through the auction grounds with methodical precision, dismantling stages, breaking chains, pulling iron brackets from the walls. Every captive wolf had been freed. Some walked out on shaking legs into daylight they hadn't expected to see. Some had to be carried. The undercroft was being taken apart piece by piece, and it sounded like bones breaking. Harsk Gren sat in chains, the same irons he had locked on others. His gaudy coat had been stripped, his platform dismantled, his gavel confiscated. He was smaller without it all. Just a sweating, blubbering man on a stone floor who couldn't stop shaking. Elowen stood before him. He couldn't meet her eyes. She looked at the man who had called her trash, who had laughed, who had joked about feeding her to pit wolves, and she watched him flinch before she even spoke. "You called me trash." I didn't know. You didn't know I was the Alpha King's mate." Her voice was steady. "That's what frightens you. Not that you were cruel to the wrong person." She leaned closer. "Every girl who stood on that stage was the wrong person." She straightened. "Remember that in your cell." Draven's trial was held in the auction hall itself. Lirien's choice. Poetic, deliberate. The man who sold wolves now standing where they had stood, judged in the same room he had profited from. He argued legality with the clipped composure of someone who still believed paperwork could save him. Elowen had no pack rights. She was eligible for auction. He had followed protocol. Lirien dismantled every argument with the cold precision of someone who had memorized the law before he'd learned to break it. The Moonkeeper line was protected under sovereign decree, older than any auction statute, older than the interpack trade agreements Draven was clinging to. Selling an Ashgrove was not a transaction. It was treason. Draven's composure held until it didn't. He looked past Lirien, at Elowen, and his eyes were not afraid. They were cold, calculated, surgical. "You think a mark on your wrist changes what you are? I raised you. I know you. You're still the girl who slept in a closet and said thank you when I gave her table scraps." His lip curled. "That girl doesn't become a queen. That girl says yes, sir, and cleans the floor." The hall went silent. Elowen walked toward him. Every soldier, every freed wolf, and every noble who had arrived to witness the fallout, all watching. She stopped in front of the man who stole her childhood. "You're right about one thing," she said quietly. "I am that girl. The one who slept under the stairs. The one who said thank you for scraps. The one who believed you when you said I was nothing." Her voice hardened. "But you made a mistake, Draven. You didn't destroy me. You just taught me what cruelty looks like, so I'd recognize it when I had the power to end it." She held his gaze. "Don't mistake what I survived for what I am." They dragged him out. His composure shattered on the threshold, not into threats but into something worse, something desperate and ugly and true. "You can't erase what I made you. You'll always be Lot 23. The doors closed. The sound echoed and died. As Elowen's hand found Lirien's. She held on tightly. He looked down at their joined fingers. "Are you all right?" She exhaled, slow, shaking, honest. "Not yet." A pause. "But I think I'm going to be." The boots were enough. Simple, dark leather, fitted perfectly. Lirien had them brought without being asked, and when Elowen laced them, she held her breath through every loop, because the act of putting on shoes that were hers, chosen for her feet, not borrowed or stolen or handed down, was so foreign it felt like ceremony. She would never stand barefoot on someone else's floor again. The hall was full, but different now. Soldiers where buyers had leered, freed wolves in the seats where alphas had lounged, pack leaders and nobles lining the perimeter with guarded, uncertain faces. Lirien's standard flew where the auction banner had hung, black and gold, the northern crown. The air smelled like cold stone and change. "There's one more thing I need you to do," Lirien had told her. "Oh, it will be the hardest." "What?" "Go back to the stage." She had frozen, every muscle locked. "No, not that wood, not that spot, not as a captive," he said carefully. "As yourself, as who you are." She climbed the steps now, the same steps. The wood groaned the same way under her weight. Her wolf stirred behind her ribs, restless, still waking, still stretching after 19 years. And her heart hammered so hard she could hear it in her teeth. She reached the center of the stage, the spot, the exact spot where the chains had held her, where the price dropped to zero, where the laughter started. She stood there. She breathed. And she spoke. "I stood here last night, chained, barefoot, lot number 23. The hall was silent. Every alpha in this room was given the chance to bid on me. None of you did. Yet the auctioneer called me trash. He offered me for free." She paused. "And do you know what the worst part was?" The nobles shifted. Some couldn't meet her eyes. "I agreed. I stood here and I nodded. Because I believed it. Because every single day of my life, someone told me I was nothing. And I never once heard anyone say otherwise." Her voice cracked. She let it. She didn't hide it. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm not here to make you kneel. I'm here because this stage," she stamped her foot, and the sound rang through the hall like a heartbeat, "should never have existed. No wolf should ever stand where I stood and hear their worth measured in silver. You put a price on me and the answer was nothing. But you were wrong. Not because a king wants me, not because of a mark on my wrist or a bloodline in my veins. You were wrong because I was never yours to sell. None of us were. The harvest auction is over, and I will make sure nothing like it ever rises again. Not while I breathe, not while I stand." She paused, quiet, certain. "And I will stand. I've learned how." The silence held for 3 heartbeats. Then Lirien, at the base of the stage, dropped to one knee. His armor struck stone like thunder. The soldiers followed. Then the freed wolves. Then, slowly, reluctantly, then with growing conviction, the nobles, the pack leaders, the alphas. The hall knelt for lot 23. Elowen stood alone on the stage. The same wood, the same air, the same girl. And no one was laughing. Every head was bowed. And when a tear fell from her amber gold eyes, it wasn't from pain. It was from the overwhelming, terrifying, a beautiful realization that she was real, that she had always been real, and that she would never, ever let anyone tell her otherwise again.